Hello, everyone. People are coming in, so we'll go ahead and get started. We'll be recording this so that we have a follow-up of this afterwards that we can share with everyone. But welcome to Crisis Marketing, why you need feedback from your audience right now. For those of you who don't know us, I am Amanda Sutt, and I'm the creative director and CEO here at Rock, Paper, Scissors. And we're a branding and marketing firm that focuses on helping our clients cut through the clutter and partner with them to build brands that connect and messages that resonate to drive results. And we have been doing this for over 30 years, so we've seen a lot of changing and done a lot of changing and are currently doing a lot of changing right now to figure out what this new world starts to look like. But joining me today is our senior content marketer, Valerie Kinney.
Good morning, everyone. All right, so we just want to give everyone a heads up before we dive into today's topic that this is not just a presentation, it's a conversation. So we definitely want you to feel free to post any questions or comments throughout the presentation in the Zoom chat box at the bottom of the screen, and we will discuss them in the Q&A at the end of the presentation. And for people that are listening to this after the live broadcast, ask away. We will definitely follow up on any comments that are posted.
Excellent. All right, so we like to start with a bit of inspiration before we dive into what today really looks like. So it takes humility to see feedback, and it takes wisdom to understand it, analyze it, and appropriately act on it. And that's what we're focusing on today, is really figuring out what feedback looks like and why it's so critical right now. It's not necessarily that instinctive reaction of when you're in crisis mode trying to figure out what it is, but when you're in the middle of crisis, one of the things is while you're managing it, which is where we are today, we have to start thinking about recovery. And that's what this is focused on, is what does recovery look like? Because we know the world is going to be different. So I want to take a minute and go back in time a little bit to talk a little bit about what happened in the Great Recession. Since that wasn't that long ago, that's 2008 to 10, whatever that period looked like for your specific industry. And some of the issues that we really got to experience was this huge shift in perception. You know, when the banking crisis happened, there was a lot of trust that was lost by the general population. You know, we saw people who had, worked for a lifetime at an industry just lose their job immediately, and that loyalty went away. And when that happened, we saw it across multiple generations, the people who lost their jobs, the people who lost, any of their investment, and then even the children of the people during that period who saw their parents go through a lot of pain. Those, i.e., would be our millennials today, lost a lot of trust in the corporations. And previous to the Great Recession, the trend in marketing had been very professional, very polished. It didn't have the authenticity that recent marketing has had. And that's one of the things that came out of that, was we saw this huge shift from people not trusting that polished message anymore, and they wanted the authentic. They wanted to hear, oops, we made a mistake, but this is how we're fixing it. They wanted it to be real and human. So I share that because we as marketers had to figure out what that new perception was of our audience and start to change how we message and communicate with people. Well, we've had another big crisis here, and people have lost trust, we've lost trust in being close to people because they could get us very sick. And what we need to be doing is we need to start listening to, what does this new reality for them look like? What does this shift in trust begin to look like? So now it's a race to figure out, what does that look like, so that we can change our messaging and that we can start to connect with those people again, and we can build trust in this new world together. So in order to do that, we have to figure out what people are thinking.
All right, and part of that active listening that Amanda was talking about is actively seeking feedback from your audience. And the good news is there are a lot of great free resources out there, as well as some really cost-effective options if you want a few more bells and whistles to work with and play with to get that valuable feedback from your audience. And so we are going to start looking at some tools for collecting feedback right now. You can see the logos across the bottom of this slide. So we're going to talk through some of these and talk about how you can start using them to listen to your audience. So before we really dive into these resources and tools that are available, we want to clarify something, which is the difference between polls and surveys. A poll only has one question, and it's just an easy way to get pretty quick and sometimes immediate feedback about a very specific topic. So think of it like when you go to vote, you're asked a question, you're given some options, and you choose the one that you want to cast your vote for. A survey, on the other hand, typically includes more than one question. They can be long, they can be short, they can be anonymous or not, and they can include a lot of different types of responses. So sometimes you'll see multiple choice, short answer, drop down, linear scale ratings, and that's just kind of scratching the surface on what you can do with a survey. So, like we said, polls are quick, easy ways to get feedback on very specific ideas or topics. So, some of the tools that you can use to conduct polls include doodle polls. These are simple, easy to set up. We use them a lot in our office, and there are free versions, so no cost involved. You can use your Facebook status on your page to conduct a poll. The option is right there when you click into your status update bar, and so it's really easy to set up again and get that out to your audience. If you have a business Instagram account, there are also polls that you can use in that. They're what they call stickers in Instagram stories that you can use to ask questions and get feedback. You can give people multiple choice options, or you can just post a question and have them respond directly. So again, another easy way to get that feedback from your audience. Zoom, which is what we're using for this webinar today, has a polling feature. So we're going to use that in just a second to let you guys help us pick the topic for our next webinar. So Amanda's going to share that in just a second, and go ahead and respond once that's out. And then we'll share the results at the end of the presentation. Google Forms is another great resource out there. It's got a lot of different ways you can work with it. You've probably responded to a form like this before, and you can set them up as a one question poll. We'll talk a little bit more in depth about it with surveys, but again, it's a free option. You just need a Google account. And then Easy Polls is another free version for those one question polls that you just kind of send out and get some really quick feedback from your audience.
So to follow up on Valerie's poll information, I'm going to give you a little bit more about surveys. And thank you. We're already getting some submissions on the polls, so that's great. Want to actually let you see what this is like in action. But surveys are also great. That gives us more information. It usually, you're not necessarily going to get as immediate of results. You're trying to get deeper into it. So there's a lot more that goes into it. So you want to think about, what are you trying to figure out during this time? So some of our favorite tools for this are Google Forms. It's always a great tool. It's free. That's good. SurveyMonkey is probably one of the leaders about doing surveys. It's in their name. And they have really nice analytics on the back end to make it easy for you to flip through and pivot it. So that's a good one. And then Wufoo forms on a website work really well for setting that up as well. So those are three really good tools that are out there and available. There are tons more. If you already have one that you're using, stick with it, because that's just the technology side of it. But there's also, want to look a little bit at the strategy behind a survey, because there's some things you want to consider before you start getting into compiling and sending. And first is when to survey your audience. There's really, you want to think about, and you can do, it doesn't have to be or with these, it could be and. You might want to do this on all of them depending on what you're trying to get information on. You might want to do a survey before you start a project. If you're going to launch some type of new product, similar to what we're doing with this poll, we want to find out before we invest time in creating content for you guys, what are you really interested in? Sometimes if you're doing a really big project, you want to test in the middle to make sure you're on track. So you send out that survey to maybe do some type of beta testing. And beta testing can be a very long form of surveying an audience before a big release. And then there's always the after, so that you're either doing improvements to your product or how to do it better next time. And you will also receive, we try and practice what we preach, a follow-up survey from us on this webinar so that we get feedback, so that we're continually improving and supporting you guys with the information you need to, run your organizations. So I also want to share with you guys the strategy that we use for outlining a survey. And you'll notice a little download available. We'll send some follow-up with you guys after this so that you have these resources available. This is the way we structure our surveys to make sure that we're making it as easy as possible for our audience, as well as getting as much as we possibly can. So I like to start every survey with what we call the opener. And this is really my qualification question. And so this will help me with a large pool of audience to know if the rest of the information in this survey is going to be relevant. Like a good example, if you're some type of, let's say, home retailer, so like you do flooring, for instance, the first question I would probably ask is, do you own your home? Do you rent your home? Or do you rent an apartment? Because then when I get all the feedback for whoever filled this out, anybody who checked either rent an apartment or rent their home, I'm probably either going to disqualify that because they're not my target audience, because they're not necessarily going to spend money on that, or I'm going to do like a very specific segment around home renters, and maybe that's a very different approach. So that lets me segment my results very quickly to make sure that I'm dealing with the appropriate feedback. Like it's actually relevant. The information is relevant to what I'm asking. So then I get into the body. These can be much longer. I have this statement here of 4 to 6 questions. And the main reason I put that here is if you do a long form survey, you're going to have a little bit different strategy. If you're having somebody take up to an hour, 30 minutes even, to do a survey, you're usually going to do some type of compensation. It could be you pay them for it, or they get a gift card, or they enter to win a gift card, or something along those lines. So it's a little bit different of approach than what we're talking about in this crisis mode, where we're just trying to get some shorter pieces out there because everybody's attention is pretty restricted right now. So we want to stick with that shorter format. So 4 to 6 questions should be something that somebody can do in under 5 minutes, which means that you're going to be more likely to get somebody to give you information. So with that being said, when you're then looking at those 4 to 6 questions, I always recommend starting broad and then getting more specific. You really want to warm up your audience and to give them a chance to think through what you really want feedback on. So start with something easy to get them focused in and getting them to think about whatever it is specifically you're trying to get them to think about, because you have no control of what they just walked into before or walked out of before they came to your survey, and their mind might be racing about trying in today's world homeschooling their kids, or how am I trying to get this technology to set up to work better remotely, and you want to help them think through what you want them to think through. So start with some easy stuff. Usually start with those simpler multiple choice checkboxes scales, and then go to an open-ended question. With that being said, I usually recommend a 2-to-1 mix. Have 2 questions that are scales, checkboxes, or radio buttons, i.e. easy questions, and then have one a little bit more time consuming with the fill in the blank. And those 2 easy questions should lead up to help them think about what more details you want in that fill in the blank. And then either do that once or repeat it twice if you're trying to do these shorter surveys. Then you want to do a closing section. And this is really important for working on understanding your audience better. So have anywhere between 1 and 3 questions to help understand your audience's demographics and psychographics better. These are always things that you want to continue to learn. And this is actually probably the most critical piece right now as we're learning about how people are behaving differently. Did their income change? What are they, did their careers change from a demographic standpoint? And then from a psychographic, and this is the critical piece, so we're getting into the psychology of people. What are their opinions, behaviors, and beliefs? We're trying to find out how people's opinions, behaviors, and beliefs are changing. So this could be as simple as, what social media platforms are you using now? If you're trying to find out, are they listening to the news? How are they listening to the news? Are they doing podcasts? So you can do that to figure out what marketing channels they're using. So that just helps you then refine your marketing tactics better as you're getting information from your audience, because you might find a new avenue that hadn't been on your radar, or you're all of a sudden seeing, my audience, isn't on Twitter anymore, they're all on Facebook, whatever that looks like, so that you can stop investing in Twitter if that's the case and put everything into Facebook. And then if you're continually polling or surveying in this case, then you get a chance to know if that shifts again in the future. Then the final section, usually just leave an open-ended comment question for, hey, any other thoughts or feedback, please fill that in. It'll probably be one of your least filled out questions, but if somebody is either incredibly happy or incredibly frustrated, you're giving them a chance and a space for them to give you feedback. So those are just some things to be thinking about when you're looking at how to structure a survey. Oops.
All right. So we want to go over some quick best practices and tips. Again, and this will be in those downloads that Amanda mentioned a minute ago that we'll send out as a follow-up. So as you're looking at polling and surveying your audience, you definitely want to know and have an idea of what you're looking for before you start even coming up with your questions. This will just help you guide your thoughts and give your audience a better idea of what you're seeking from them so then they can give you good feedback. You've probably heard this acronym before, to KISS it. Keep it short and simple unless you really need, like Amanda was talking about, those lengthy responses and you want people to really spend time on this. And again, the longer surveys are going to be the situations where you might compensate people or have them enter to win a gift card and give them some kind of incentive for giving you feedback. But otherwise, just keep it short and sweet, to the point. Be clear up front with the amount of time it's going to take people to fill out the survey, because we know people are checking their email throughout the day or social media or whatever, and they might see it and want to respond. But if they realize, oh, it's going to take me 10 minutes to fill this out, I don't have time for that right now, so that they can come back to it later. Try to keep your questions pretty simple and around 10 to 15 words max. The exception of this is going to be, of course, if you need to give some detail and explain that, but this will just help people skim through and be able to answer quickly. And only ask questions that you're actually going to use the answers for. Don't spend time fluffing it up with stuff that doesn't matter or is not applicable. Don't combine your questions either. Ask for one piece of data or information per question. If you're familiar with marketing and advertising in the sense of creating visual ads, one concept per ad. This is kind of similar to that. You really want to keep it just that one idea so it helps people focus their thoughts. If you're conducting polls in a live event and you want to do multiple ones, space them out enough to help break up the content, and then that will re-engage people if their attention's been drawn somewhere else. So if you're doing a 30-minute presentation, you might want to do 3 to 4 polls, so you're doing them every 10 minutes or so. When you're offering those multiple choice questions, don't give people too many responses. Again, be specific and keep it, keep their attention span focused. And then again, like Amanda said a minute ago, when you're doing surveys, try to collect some demographic and psychographic information. So talking to people about what social media platforms they use, where they're getting their news from, how often they check their email, that sort of thing. And of course, you always want to thank your audience for putting the time into giving you this feedback. And then another way to collect feedback from people is simply just to pick up the phone and start calling people. Phone interviews are great because they're a little bit more personal and you can sometimes get better feedback from people. Really, with calling people, the strategy you want to think about is talking to clients you already have. You don't want this to feel like you're being a telemarketer. So this is continuing and nurturing those relationships you already have with people who want to hear from you. So think of it as like your top 5% customers. That's a good strategy to kind of start off with if you want to go this route. And keep in mind that the process of calling your customers can be time consuming, but these calls can be pretty quick. And you can let people know up front when you're talking to them, hey, we just wanted to get your feedback about your recent experience visiting our oil change center or whatever your service is. Give them one specific question that they can talk to and, let them know, we just want to spend, 5 minutes talking to you about this. So that, again, they know that you're not going to be talking to them for 30 minutes or whatever. You just want to get quick feedback.
And to kind of piggyback off of that, as businesses reopen, this is something, maybe not phone, but just talking to your audience, have your staff give them some very specific questions as they're interacting with your audience, to see how they're feeling. And that's really what we're trying to get at, is how do they feel about the world? And if you can start to understand what those emotions are, you're going to be able to have your team resonate better with them, as well as having your marketing message. So phone's great right now, especially for social distancing, but just know that could expand more. We just need to reach out and talk to people more, is really what it's getting to.
Yep. Also, we mentioned Facebook and Instagram earlier, doing polls through that, but a great way to get engagement with your audience is to use those live video features on these platforms, because it allows you to interact with them in the moment, and you're continually building that trust with your new audience members and nurturing those relationships you already have with longtime customers. This is a great way to have a conversation. Again, it gives them that chance to interact with you on a different level. And it also gives them a face to put with the organization. And that can kind of really foster that personal connection, that has been missing lately with the state of the world and all the businesses that have, had to temporarily shut their doors. So that's just giving people a nice touch point, to say, hello, how's it going? What are you looking forward to when we reopen? Those sorts of things.
And also, for some businesses and organizations, it might make sense to include a feedback box on your website. And this could be another way to get candid content and feedback from your customers about their experience with you, your product, services, frustrations, what it would be to help them. Um, and you want to keep it as simple as possible. You can also use a net promoter partner or resource, so you can get that net promoter score where you're sending a single follow-up question after a service has been provided. If you're shut down, that's a little tricky right now, but that's something as you reopen to really lean heavy into, so that you're once again continually getting that feedback loop to understand how that pivot and shift really starts to look. So you've collected that data. Now we need to start reading that data. And so I want to talk a little bit about how do you start to interpret that. It's not because not everyone has a background in statistics to know how to really look at that. So I'd like to start with the idea of, once you get your feedback, you have to take that moment before you start looking at it and saying, do I have a large enough sample for this to be an accurate polling? So there's a couple different things that you can look at with this. Some standards that we're seeing is that research suggests if it's an internal survey, so like with a staff or some type of very tight-knit organization where there's very strong relationships, if your response is about 30 to 40%, you probably have a good sampling. Whereas if you're doing external, like with your audience at large, 10 to 15% is acceptable as well. So if you're under those marks, you might want to push that survey out again. And we're going to have some follow-up timelines in some of those downloads that we're going to send you as well, just to give you a structure to work with, so you're not having to start from scratch and guessing what that should look like. But this will give you a chance to really look at that and say, okay, does this data do what it needs to do? So you want to look at your audience size that you sent it to compared to your response rate. That's a really good comparison to look at. You also want to look at your audience representation. We have some other resources and blogs that are some good background. Like if this is the first time you're looking at this or really starting to dive back into it, we want to make sure we're arming you with good information. So we have some articles that we'll send you specifically in regards to audience representation. That when I was talking a little bit about that survey and that opener question, that really helps you make sure that you have a good representation of your audience. So going back to that homeowner versus home renter. You also want to take into consideration the margin of error, and you're more than likely going to typically get people who are really angry or really happy with your results when you look at this data. So taking that into account and knowing that people do the best when they remember things. It's not a science and it's not perfect. So know that there's going to be some skews. If some data comes back and you're like, man, that is so different than what we thought it would be, that gives you the opportunity to get curious and go, okay, why did I think it was going to be very different than what my audience told me? And so part of that could have been the way you asked the question and they interpreted it very differently, and that could be where it is. Or it's just something that's not in your scope of vision, and this is alerting you to, hey, I have a gap in my process. I need a better system here to facilitate that. So just take that into account. And once again, there is margin. And you also want to take into account the type of survey. Polls, you're probably going to get a better response because they're immediate. They're a lot of times, especially if you're doing the social media ones, it's whoever's on. Whereas if you're doing that long form survey, you're going to have a smaller and smaller sample size. So those are just some good resources to take into consideration with that.
All right. You also want to clean up your data. And so basically what this means is removing any test data. This could be where you had some of your team members testing your survey out to make sure that everything is working the way it should and that your responses are feeding in. So get rid of anything that was helping you test, as well as anything that's not relevant or maybe inappropriate. We've all seen where spam comments come in on social media and websites and that sort of thing. And if you're conducting a poll and have shared that link out to the masses in a public way, there's a chance you could get some spam data as well. So just take out anything that's not going to be relevant, that's inappropriate, or that was test data that you're not going to need in the long run.
Also be aware and mindful of outliers. I alluded to that earlier. You're going to have people who are really pissed or really happy. And if you have 100 responses and 2 of them are totally out there, not even relevant, a lot of times you might just want to eliminate those. And that is statistical best practices. You do want to make note of that. You don't want to just discount and just say, those people are crazy, because there's going to be some level of truth in those. So you should look at it and see if it's relevant. But you also don't want to change your entire structure of something just because 2% of your audience isn't happy. Because remember, 98% likes the way you do it. So just, as I said, be mindful of those outliers, and make sure you have enough data and support if you're really going to change and invest in something new. So just be mindful of that. And then also work with integrity when you're looking at this. The common phrase is that you can make the data say whatever you need it to, and that's true because you can start to do things like eliminate outliers or funnel your data. But just make sure that the whole point of this is to create a better organization and to serve your audience better. And so if you skew this data too much to show what you need, what looks good, you're not really serving the purpose of getting this feedback. This feedback is really to help you change in a productive way, in one that's going to align with your audience. So just be mindful of what your goal is with any surveying or feedback you're trying to get. And it's okay if you get bad feedback on things, because it's just, once again, showing you where you need to focus your time and energy to, have a better result for your audience.
All right, so we've talked a little bit about the resources available, the different ways to gather feedback, and as Amanda was just talking about, interpreting that data. So now it's time to pick something and start. At this point, especially with the situation that we're all facing right now, anything is better than nothing. So go ahead and start thinking about how you want to get feedback from your audience. And as you're starting on this journey, we do have a few reminders so that as you're getting on that road and getting insight from your audience, you can be prepared and ready to go.
And remember, it's about connecting with people, and that's more important than being perfect. The rule book got thrown out the window. I've lost track of days. 6 weeks ago,
Like a month
5 weeks
ago,
ago, something like that.
something.
And so they're just looking for true connection. They're looking for support. They're looking for help. So just staying top of mind, that's an important part of just marketing and getting this feedback as a way. And people always really want to hear we want to be heard. So just remember that. So don't let perfection get in the way. And that's just kind of the main thing to think about.
All right. Like I just said a minute ago, start acting now. The sooner you kind of figure out what the new normal is and what your audience wants and needs, the sooner you can get back to your new normal and start leading in your industry. So people are looking to you for that leadership and the ideas and that sort of thing. So I think with that being said, Amanda, we are ready to start taking questions.
Absolutely. I just posted a comment in the chat. So if you guys have any specific questions, we received some questions prior to the webinar. So we'll start with those to go with that. So first up, how do we handle negative feedback you're collecting in a poll or survey? And are there times or best practices for when to address them offline or personally when you're able to? As fast as you can.
Yeah.
I think is the best response. You should, like, if they're not anonymous and you actually know who posted it, that's a chance for you to connect with them. Those people are giving you some very valuable information. So, and you have to look at it as, even if you lost them as a customer because they're really unhappy, by listening to that feedback and maybe even doing a follow-up call with them, if you can, might change the fate of other customers who might be in the same boat, that you're able to shift whatever that product or service is. So if you can, do it, and as quickly as you can. And kind of to that point, just always a reminder, if you get reviews on anything, uh, Google, Facebook, any of those review-based platforms, Yelp, any of your Yex kind of things, respond to them. Respond to them
Mhm.
as fast as you can. That's a big metric in search results. And just common courtesy to other people. If they complain about something or say something great about something, either say thank you or say, hey, let's work on this and fix it. So people just want to be heard.
Absolutely. The next question we got was when to use anonymous versus traceable polls. So this really kind of depends on the scenario you're working with. A lot of times you're probably going to be more likely to get very honest and candid feedback from your audience if they know they won't be identified, because they're more willing to open up when they're able to just send you their comments and know that you're not going to know who they are. So really just keep that in mind. Is this a situation where you really need the person identified, or is it okay for you to just get that really kind of raw, open feedback from people without them knowing that, or without you knowing who they are?
Mhm. Absolutely. Okay, one other one we got in is, how often should you poll or survey your audience for feedback? Well, good news is we can do it a lot more right now. And people want that. There is this sense of connecting and having a voice. This can be as frequently as once a week right now, just because time has changed its cadence. And so we're also just, it's this weird period of history. Like, if you read a blog that's a week old, it's out of date.
Mm-hmm.
So when we're dealing with that type of a time quandary, I don't like, just, it's just weird. You can poll more often, you can get feedback, especially as people are opening back up. We're hearing more and more about phased openings. So perception is going to change with each phase opening. What is that fear? Is there confidence being built? Do they open up businesses and there's a surge of cases, so they have to pull back? Like, there's just going to be a lot that goes on. So I wouldn't do it more than once a week, but we can do it more frequently after we kind of settle out and figure out what new normal looks like. Quarterly is probably fine, but the minimum is you should do some type of survey at least once a year, to make sure that that's shifting. But right now, yeah, you can do it a lot more.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. The last question that we got before the webinar was, what are some topics to poll or survey your audience on? Specifically, this person was asking about newsletters, events, content, all those types of things. Honestly, you can poll or survey your audience on anything you want to. There are a lot of different ways that this can play into giving you feedback on what your audience is looking for and how often they want to hear from you. So it's, if you've never done it before, it's definitely something you're going to have some trial and error on figuring out how often and what types of surveys and polls and the content you include in them, that your audience is going to be more responsive to. But definitely, like Amanda was just saying, now is a really good time to start kind of playing and with it and testing it out and figuring out what works for your organization, so you can get that feedback and start crafting messages and content and getting information out there that's going to be what your audience is looking for from you.
Absolutely. I got one question from our chat, and it's, what are some ideas to incentivize people to participate in surveys? Get creative, especially right now with so many people in place. Some of the more traditional options have been gift cards. Like Amazon gift cards are really easy to send out. If you have somebody's email, you can just push
Mm-hmm.
it to them. You can also do, complete your survey for a chance to win, and then you just have one prize. So like you could have like a single like $100 Amazon or Visa or whatever grocery gift card of what it could be. Right now, you could have fun, and you could, if you have a little extra toilet paper, you could easily do a raffle to get
Yep.
toilet paper, and that might really get people to answer your survey. So just have fun with it, be creative. Part of this is also knowing your audience and what they want and what they might be interested in, how much time they have. So that kind of goes into even what platform you're asking them, what time of day you're asking them. Like if you're dealing with working parents, for instance, you might not want to do things until after bedtime. So when they're like finally get a chance to breathe from homeschooling or whatever that reality looks like, but they also might be trying to get work in at that point. So it's just kind of that juggle. Know your audience, understand who they are, um, and kind of know what some of their pain points are, and that can be some fun different ways to be able to incentivize them for that. So that's probably my best support for that. So that seems to be it for questions. If you guys have any other questions once we send out this follow-up, please let us know. We'll post them on the YouTube page where we have the video as well, so just to have that additional information. And also, as always, if you're not sure where to get started or you need help with, this is a component of whatever your marketing plan is, we are here to help with that. So you can just reach out to schedule a time. We'll send a link. But that's what it is. We do, of course, very intensive marketing plans, structures with clients. However, we don't always have the luxury of that time right now. So we are offering quick 60-minute consultations. So just, reach out, info@123shoot.com. And then our next webinar.
Yes, our next webinar is set for Wednesday, May 20th at 11 a.m. And we pulled you guys on topic ideas earlier. So Amanda, do you have any results you want to share?
I do. We have a tie. So
Awesome.
we might actually end up doing 2 webinars next month if you guys really want us to. One is the winners are sales funnels and strategies, and then audience profiles. So we'll pull together some content to really help you guys with that. Also had some requests for social media and how that's changed in the last few months, and we might just do that as supplemental content. But as always, guys, please let us know what you need information-wise. We're continually listening and paying attention to marketing channels and how to use them and the best practice and strategies. But as you're trying to navigate what this new world looks like, let us know. We need to know what you're hearing, boots on the ground. And we're happy to, we're doing these webinars at least once a month, and a lot of other blog and other content. So we only really want to create content that's serving you. So please let us
Mhm.
know.
And I will add to that before we close, Amanda. Like we've mentioned all throughout this webinar, we will be sending out a survey as part of our follow-up, and we will have some topic ideas for you to vote on in that survey as well. And also a chance for you to let us know if there's any specific questions you'd like us to address in future webinars, or in some cases we may be able to do some supplemental blogs or that sort of thing, like Amanda was alluding to a minute ago. So definitely please let us know what questions you have so that we can help you and support you as best as possible.
Absolutely. Well, thank you guys for all joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you guys all next month. And best of luck, and please reach out if you need support, and we'll talk to you all soon. Bye.